Kaf Mud Aleph, and 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 17 lines to the bottom. 17 lines to the top. Tan Rabbanan, correct. So it's a little bit of a holdover to the last piece, and to just remind ourselves, this had to do with the fact of whether you needed 3 days before Yontif to cancel out the Shiva, right? Or 2 days, or we paskin actually that it's even Shoachas. Right, we paskin that if a person sits Shiva right before Yontif, even for a partial day or an hour, right, that would be sufficient as long as he does some type of nihuge avelus. However, there is a shita which had come through this whole sugya that really, and based upon the Mishnah, that you needed 3 days to do this. So we talked about in general, and then we talked about if that was the case after Yontif, you still have 5 days of Shiva, but people wouldn't have to pay a Shiva call to you, right? Because Nesaska Bo Rab and so forth. Tan Rabbanan. So this is more of a subcategory of that. Kiem kviat hamita shlosh yomim kodem haregel, eino tzarach lechvoto achar haregel. Okay, so kviat hamita is something we don't do today, right? This is, they turn the beds upside down. Okay, we don't do it because our beds don't lend themselves to that. Right? It's hard to imagine how you could turn. I'm not talking about flipping the mattress over. You had a real bed, in a bed frame, how you would turn a bed frame upside down and you could still use it. When they turned the beds upside down in those days, they could still sleep on it. So, practically speaking, this has fallen into disuse since the Middle Ages, right? And in fact, probably in the days of the Mishnah, people slept on the floor in many cases. Imagine something. There are different types of beds that are found in Masechet Shabbos.
We lived this before, right? Where they turning the thatch of the bed frame
upside down. It was reversible.
Right.
Correct. So it was possible to do so. I guess there may be some beds today, like on a very primitive beds, you probably could do that, but we don't. And by the symbolism, of course, is the fact that there is a diminishing of the human image, and therefore the bed, which is seen as the causative factor for reproduction and the future of humanity, right, where there's cohabitation taking place, source of life, right, or the area, right, the environment where the source of life takes place, is therefore turned upside down to show there's a diminishing of it. Which is, by the way, why we turn over, where we cover the mirrors, right? Diminishing the human image, right? Okay, turn Rabban. So this Mishnah, this Brisa should say, says that if you did Kriyas Hamita for 3 days before Yontif, you don't have to turn it over after Yontif. Even though that it looks like you know some things may have to be afterwards, this would cancel it out. Div Rabbi Lezer, the Chacham say no, 1 day is enough, even 1 hour, partial day is enough. Okay, and this is the statement that's a subset of what we did before. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon. Question, okay. Hein divrei Beit Shammai, hein divrei Beit Hillel. So now Rav Elazar Shimon says we have a similar kind of machlokas, Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, in terms of once again relating to the amount of period of time before the regel. It's a similar thing. Beit Shammai omim shlosh yomim, Beit Hillel omim afil yom echad. Okay. So once again, we've had this same kind of machlokas again and again in different formats, either in generality, or Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, or now Kfiyat Hamita. And now the Gemara is going to try to kind of give us really what is the halacha, what is the conclusion of all of this. And we had some of the halachic statements before, but now there's a real conclusion to tell you black and white that we don't paskin in 3 days. Right? Remember, when we started doing the Mishnah, I told you some of the things in the Mishnah are not going to be halacha because the Gemara is going to go out of its way to show you the other sources. Rav Huna, Rav Chir bar Abba, Rav Yochanan, the Amri Lein. Some people say Rav Yochanan, Rav Chir bar Abba, or Rav Huna. And whoever said it, what did they say? Afilu yomechad, afilu shoachas. Okay. So that you don't need 3 days, but even a partial day before the Yontif. Okay?
Why don't you just quote that general rule that you mentioned?
We are going to quote it in 2 lines. Okay? There you go. Rav Omar, So then Rava says, halacha kitana didan diamar shlosha. So now we have a different psak from Rava, who says, well, 3 days, like the Tan of our Mishnah. Okay, but that's not the end of it. Rava and Abaye are the third generation, or fourth generation of the Amoraim, but there's still 2 generations afterwards. So we have a story of Ravina. Ravina ikla l'sura de pras. Ravina came to Surah of Pras. Amalei Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Chaviva l'Ravina. Hilchus Amai. Okay, so he asked him this question. In this case, you're all talking about what is the halacha, and Ravina is towards the end of Tkufas Amoraim. So Amalei afilu yom echad v'afilu sho'achas. Okay, so we see the Ravina, who is the what we call Ravina Ravashi, at the end of the time of the Amoraim. So Ravina says 1 hour, 1 day, right? Yosef Rav Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Ami, Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, Akilad Rav Yitzchak ben Elazar. Okay, so these people were sitting killas, I think like a porch or something. They were sitting like outside on the veranda of Rav Yitzchak ben Elazar. And Nafak Miltami ben Naihu. And let's see. So I'm sorry. So that is really, I went too far. That's really the end of the halacha of what that we paskin even one day. So you see in this whole 1 hour or 1 day or partial day, in this whole listing of all the halachas, first we see that there were different opinions mentioned, but the last one is mentioned is afilu shoachas afilu yom echad, and also who's the one who said it? Ravina, who's the end of Tkufas Amoraim. So and the Gemara the calls this Hilchus Amai. They're asking him what is the halacha, and he gives you the halacha. So this becomes the way when you look at the sugya. What is the conclusion? What is the halacha? All right, partial day. Even a partial day before Yantiv will cancel the shiva.
So just before we go on, the Mishnah of course said 3 days. So how did they account for the Mishnah? Or they just
it's machlokas tanoim. Okay,
right.
And I thought it said halacha kedivre hamekel ba'evel.
Right.
But I guess not. Okay.
Say something like that.
I thought it was coming up again, but I guess we had it before.
But all they had to do was quote that. And
right.
No, but it's a machlokas tanoim, they're saying. I mean, that's the point. Right?
Okay, so it actually comes up, my mistake, comes up in about 12 lines in relation to something else.
Here it was before. Yomar Shmuel halacha kedivre hamekel
be'evel. Correct. So this comes up again and again, and this is one of the reasons why we follow that. But just in terms of seeing how the mahalacha of the sugya goes, the conclusion is clearly afilu yom echad. Okay. Even though the Mishnah says 3 days, right, and we have a rule that we usually follow a Stam Mishnah, no, there's an exception to the rule. Okay, and that's the conclusion of that. Tosfos points out that one of the people who said it's even Shoachas is Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says emphatically in other places, halacha k'stam Mishnah. Okay, so Tosfos says, okay, that's a question. He doesn't have an answer, so obviously this is an exception. Okay, so for every rule there is always the exceptions to the rule. Okay, now, so this is the end. So as I said, when I stopped last week, I realized afterwards that the last 6 lines we just did is the adjunct, the end of the previous sugya. Now we're going to talk about something else. We're going to get to talk about what's called Shmua Krova and Shmua Rechoka. Okay, Shmua Rechoka means that you haven't heard about the passing, or you get news about the person passing after 30 days, right? And the halacha is
for 1 hour.
For 1 hour, right? A partial day. It's 1 day, but it's a partial day, right? What's the svara? What's the reason?
It's after the time.
Therefore, it's after the time. So you can't make it up.
Right.
All right. So I think it's more. Yeah, Moshe.
No, I was going to say your state of mind is different. I think maybe.
Right. It's old news. It's old news.
Yeah, but for you,
but for you, this happened recently in my wife's family, where my wife's aunt passed away, and
nobody told her.
And nobody told my mother-in-law. She asked, and then she said they wanted to keep it from her, so that she didn't, so that she didn't have to sit shiva.
But for you, it's new. For you, for the person who hears it, for everybody else, it's old news. For the person who hears it, it's new.
Well, it's new, but
it's new, but it's not the same. You know what? I can only compare it when you watch the newscast in the evening or however you listen to news on the radio. When it's new news, you listen to it. When suddenly you were away for a number of weeks, I don't know, and you lost track of time. You go on a vacation, you go to Israel, and you're not keeping on. You come back and they say, 3 weeks ago the following occurred. You say, okay.
So you got the condensed for the whole 3 weeks. You got everything.
But,
Right.
but on the other hand, this person, my mother-in-law in this case, was deprived of sitting shiva.
So that's as important to understand. There is no mitzvah that you have to tell the person that they have to sit shiva. The mitzvah is, in other words, if a person never has to sit shiva, nothing was lacking. It's not like you didn't have a lulav and esrog for sukkahs.
But from a psychological point of view, there was no catharsis, there was no letting go, saying goodbye to a dear close relative.
True. So it depends, I guess, on how, people have to make the value judgment, A, when you hear the news, right? And B, could the person attend the funeral? How important is it? And what is their state of health?
The funeral was Funeral Yisrael, and this woman was in New York.
But many times it also it's also related to the state of health of the person who is the Avel. Right. You know, that person has to sit shiva, and you guys, as a whole thing, right? Not only about a minyan, but you have to set up a shiva house, and people have to be there. And
someone's doing them a favor,
right?
So that's what they think.
Well, that was their intention.
They are not.
So back in the day, the Mishnah, my suspicion is most of Shmuel Rechokus were not people doing people favors.
No.
Right?
You just took time to get the news.
Correct. I recall many years ago, of a person who came to me with a Shmuel Rechoka because the person who passed away was in Russia. This is 20 years ago, and communications were not what they are today. And the Iron Curtain was still iron. Okay, so and finally the news got out. Must have sent him a letter. I don't even know how he got the news, and it came to me. I said, well, it's like after 30 days. So you're right. Do you feel deprived? I guess you could say that, but if you can't go to the levaya. It's sometimes very difficult sitting by yourself.
Correct, and that's what it would have been. My mother-in-law would have sat by herself in New York. Her sister passed away in Beersheba. It just wasn't possible. And she's 86 years old.
And she's 86 years old. And that's usually the issue. You say, well, it's a tircha, just getting by.
Favor.
Yeah.
So it's not. Don't look if it's doing her favor. Look at there's no obligation that she has to sit shiva, right? Okay. Okay. So at any rate, that's the piece we're going to go into. By the way, it's a machlokas once again. You'll see there are two opinions, whether it is true for Shmuel Rechoka, and then we're going to ask what about the 30th day. So close and so far. Okay. If you hear about which ways the 30th day fall under, up to 30 or after 30.
Go easy.
Okay. So the Gemara says as follows. So just go back to what I ran through before. Amar
Yosef
Rabbi Chir bar Abba, Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka. So the following people were sitting. Rabbi Chir bar Abba, Rabbi Ami, and Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka were sitting. Akila, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. They were sitting on this porch of Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, and he didn't have a killer, no, okay? No, fuck, I was waiting.
Maybe that's where the Yiddish comes from, I don't know.
Okay. I doubt it.
Okay.
Nafak Nosemi Benayu. And the following thing came from them. So we don't know exactly who said what and how the discussion came about, but the following discussion took place. And it's the question, Minayin Lavelus Shiva. How do you know that Avelus takes place for 7 days? Okay, now so it's a very funny kind of question, because you see the answer that the Gemara gives is a very unusual kind of answer. How do you know that there's 7 days of Avelus? So look what the Gemara says. Almost the prophet says, I'm going to turn your holidays to sadness. It's a very sad prophecy. Right? It means about destruction. So what do we learn? Ma chag shiva, afavelus shiva. The same way Yantav is how long? 7 days. So exactly God is saying, like Midah Keneged Midah, the 7 days you celebrated will be turned into 7 days of Avelus. Okay, that's the Gemara's presentation.
You never passed it from Amos
So you're right. The answer is that's correct. And to make it more further complicated, the Yerushalmi actually asked this question. The Yerushalmi brings a number of other suggestions where it comes from. Yerushalmi says it comes from the story of Yosef. Vayas Laviv Evel Shivas Yomim. Good. So the Yerushalmi actually rejects that because it's before Matan Torah. Okay, in other words, I know we have the rule the Avos kept the Torah, but But this is like not even the avos. This is the descendants of Yosef or his brothers. Right? They don't marry. The brothers not really called avos. Did they keep this because it was a halachic constraint, or because this was a tradition, or maybe it was an Egyptian tradition? That's one source that they brought. So once again, they're not ironclad sources. The second source they bring is before the Mabul. It says Vayehi l'shivas hayamim. So that was 7 days. Why did God have to wait 7 days? So the Yerushalmi suggests one of two possibilities. Either this was the death of Mr. Shelach, and they had to sit shiva for Mr. Shelach, or Hakadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol was sitting shiva for the world that was about to be destroyed. It was like a pre shiva. Okay.
It's really stretching it.
Just a little.
Correct. Okay. And then then the Yerushalmi says from the Bnei Aaron, who did not sit Shiva during the consecration. It was Shiva Simei HaMiluim. So the 7 days, if to say they would have sat Shiva for 7 days, but they say for 7 days of the consecration. And then one more thing that is brought there, and once again this is also a bit of a stretch, the story with Miriam, when she speaks Lashon Hara. What happens to Miriam? She goes out of the camp for how long? 7 days. And what does Moshe say? Al not hi kames.
Right.
She shouldn't be like a dead person. So what do you mean? What do you mean like a dead person? So Moshe Pshat is, right, she's going to be, her leprosy is the limb is deformed and desiccated and is not getting nutrients. It's not, right, it's dead. It's in fact it's denerved. That's why lepers lost limbs, because the whole nervous system broke down. They couldn't feel. So it's like a mace. But the drash is the same way that Miriam was outside for 7 days, like a mace, so you have to sit shiva for 7 days, you're outside the camp, so to speak. So all of these are ramazim. By the way, there really is no real proof any better about 7 days. No. And in fact, the Rambam writes, and others say it's true, the Minhat Torah, it's only 1 day of Avelus. Okay. I don't remember, but there's 1 day of Avelus. Now, 1 day, by the way, that you understand what this means, the 1 day of Avelus is a very short time many times, because it means when they come back from the funeral, from the cemetery until the evening. Unless they're buried early in the morning, or sometimes they're buried at night. Then you'd have the night and the day. But that day is the first day.
And perhaps the only day from Torah.
From the Torah. And it's the only day that the Avel, and therefore the first day is the day the Avel does not wear tefillin. Now once again, that does not normally come across. This doesn't come across because the day of the funeral, he's an onain. So he doesn't wear tefillin as an onain. Right? But the reality is, you could argue that when they come back from the cemetery, you should put tefillin on. They don't, because the first day the Avel doesn't put tefillin on. It's pe'er. Then we paskin specifically for the Avelus Minat Torah, right? When my mother passed away in Eretz Yisrael, the Levaya was at night, because in Eretz Yisrael they bury at night. It was at night. It was 9 o'clock at night.
With the torches or something?
With the big flashlights, not torches like the old biblical
torches.
No,
like flame.
That big, humongo utility lights, like you couldn't imagine.
Like construction, like you see on the roads, those giant lights.
Well, not exactly. It looked more like square things, but they were that bright. They had a whole bunch of them. And then we got back, and then the next morning we got up. It was the first day Shiva. We didn't wait to film the first day. But just so we understand, so the fact that these are unusual kinds of psukim, you say,
you did not.
We did not for the first day. Which I'm saying, but you never have that, I'm saying never, it's very rare to have that experience that we literally had pretty much a full day of the first day Shiva.
But here in North America...
Because we don't do it at night.
No, but in North America, the first day is before the burial, so you don't put on tefillin before.
But that's not Shiva. That's Anina's owning.
Yeah, and then I see. I got you. Okay, got it. Okay.
That's owning.
Yeah, it's owning. Yeah. No.
But Rabbi, before we go further, are we saying that the Chachamim somewhere passed a decree saying there should be Shiva? If we agree, we have no sources.
So it's clear that this is a rabbinic addition to what Shiva.
Where did they say it? Like, we didn't hear.
It says right here. That's why he's asking. He says, where do we know it from? In other words, you obviously realize they didn't sit down to say, let's invent this. They're now looking and trying to backtrack and say, what could have been? What was going on in the minds of the early Chazal who set up the period of Shiva for 7 days? Right? because everybody sits Shiva for 7 days, or people are supposed to sit Shiva for 7 days. So what was it actually based upon? Where is there a remez in the Torah for this? And that's why they come. That's why we bring this in to try to say that, at least from Amos, right? From Amos is based upon the fact that the Chagechem will return to Eivel. So Chag is 7 days, Eivel is 7 days. It's not that bad a remez when you think about it. Compared to the others, compared to the ones Yerushalmi is bringing, it's on equal footing.
With an Onain, do you not?
Onain does not do mitzvos.
If you wanted to, you can?
You can't. Okay, an Onain does not do positive mitzvos. He can't break any laws.
But you can't do positive.
He can't do positive mitzvos.
And the first day Shiva, also, if you want to put on tefillin, you can't. Like a person
you can't, correct, you can't.
Uncomfortable davening without tefillin.
No.
You're uncomfortable with davening. I don't know, I feel uncomfortable.
But you don't daven. The first day of the Onain doesn't daven.
Okay, I feel uncomfortable.
So guess what? An Onain is not a time of comfort.
No,
if you really want to understand the Jewish tradition,
not the right word comfort. I don't feel right. Not the word comfort. I don't feel right.
That first day after your mother passed away.
Yes.
At Shachri.
We did not wear tefillin.
But you said Kaddish.
Yes, correct. We davened.
It's not a mitzvah.
But that's because tefillin is called pe'er. Pe'er is a symbol of beauty. And therefore you're in this disheveled state. And we daven. Correct.
An Onain would not.
An Onain does not daven. An Onain does not daven.
Okay.
You know, when my mother passed away, it was a very unusual kind of thing. My mother took sick. I got a flight. Okay, I was able to actually get a flight. I think I called TikTok to help me out. Okay, I got a flight. I went to the airport and I'm waiting with my wife and even before you go through security, and I get the call my mother passed away. Okay, so I got on the plane and I was an Onain. There's an Onain on the plane. My Aninas was really sitting on the plane. And you know, the hardest part about flying is you have to get up to daven. Right? So the redeeming feature is I didn't have to get up to daven. What can I say? You know, and then now we're back to seeing that the bread, the meals are Mizonos buns, right? On the I
don't know.
Yeah, they published them Mizonos buns. But there was a time where people got away from that, and the organizations were afraid to say it, and people were getting up to wash. And how do you wash it? Where do you wash it? It's like, so once again, these were the kinds of things that I guess I could say that I didn't have to be concerned about. Right? This is 10 years ago.
What about bracha? Also, you don't say.
You don't have to make a bracha. Correct. You don't have to make a bracha. You don't have to bench. Right? You can't eat treif. Right? You can't break Shabbos. But you don't. But that's a halacha of Onain.
How would davening on a plane affect the status of Onainness? Why would you?
What was I doing?
Why can't you make it? Because it has not. You can't do anything.
Anyway,
so I'll tell you. So the answer is, well, I could, because I actually was writing a hesped. I actually had time to sit down and think about what to say. So even though I was on the plane and I really wasn't being misasik, but I could be, and I still was, and therefore I really wasn't owning. So anyways. It was a very, very unusual situation. Look, every time you fly for these kinds of things are unusual. I remember I actually went to the stewardess and said, they're holding the funeral for me. I need to get there quick. Can I be the first one off the plane? Can I sit in first class? And because you get off first, as opposed to it's a whole jumbo, whatever it is. And they said, fine, sure. So they actually moved me up to the business class. But this was before the new terminal opened up. Remember the old terminal in Ben Gurion? What happened when you got off the plane? You had to wait for the bus. So everybody got on the same stupid bus.
Anyway.
So it didn't really help. And then, in fact, I remember I got there, and they actually my brother knew someone. My brother used to work for the army, so he knew someone. They actually were able to telex to the plane to tell me what time the funeral was, which is very unusual that they bring a private message there. Right? They told me the time for the funeral, and they told me they were not going to hold the funeral. Either I was there or I wasn't there. That was the news. Okay? And
why couldn't they hold it?
because they wanted to bury the same day. Actually, it
was this next day.
So they actually asked the Shaila. They actually wanted to bury my mother. My brothers wanted to bury one of my brothers specifically wanted to bury her before sundown. And then they prevailed because I was coming, and they spoke to a couple of Rabbanim. They said, well, if you don't have to bury sundown, you can bury the same
later on,
right, even though it's really the next day. Okay,
so
the same day.
You were arriving at that time.
Yes, correct. I know.
So why couldn't you hold on for that?
Okay, we're not going to. That's it. Okay, because they wanted to cover the mace. What can I tell you? Anyways, I got off the plane, I got up. No, it was after sunset. It was 9 o'clock at night. So I got off the plane, and when I went to the airport, my mother was still alive. Right. So I really wasn't wearing clothing that I was really wanted to go to funeral. Sure. And I got there, and I'm trying to remember what happened, and I can't remember. I've been on the phone, and I said to the person picking me up was my cousin. I said I'm waiting for my luggage. Mm-hmm. And they said, you don't have time to wait for your luggage. Right. And I said, well, let's wait a few more minutes. Right? And the Baruch Hashem, you can wait. Sometimes your luggage is the last one off. The luggage came on time, and I grabbed my luggage, and I went into the washroom, and I changed. So I should look up as little, normal. And we drove. We took a taxi, and we drove over to the cemetery. And in fact, we got there literally in time. So the cemetery was right outside Beit Shemesh. Some people know where it is. There, it's a Chaim. It's on the road to Beit Shemesh. There you go. Okay, so it's not extremely far from the airport. It's not that close, I'm saying. Anyways, enough stories. All I'm trying to say, that's all about an onain. The Levi was at night. The next morning, that night we were already available, right? 9 o'clock, 9:30. The whole thing of being in a cemetery at night is very surreal. It's extremely surreal. And in Eretz Yisrael, the heart, and I wasn't prepared for this. What? No, that I was prepared for. No, no. But after they finish the grave, the Avelim take their shoes off. Okay, all the other people brought slippers at the cemetery, and you have to walk back.
On the stones.
On the concrete. The concrete there is not concrete. It's whatever it is. It's ripped up pavement. So
and they took
they take you because they said you're now, and you know, one of something, the chevra in Eretz Yisrael, the chevra Kaddish is a little more raw than they are here in North America. There's no arguing with them. Okay, they said you have to take your shoes off because you can't wear shoes. You're an ovel.
Right there
at the kever.
What do they do in Toronto? They try to go home.
Go home. Okay. What's the het? The heter is that in Avel, the reality is if you need shoes to wear to protect yourself, you can wear shoes to protect yourself.
I was just at a funeral today. Can you imagine if they had to take off their shoes today? It fell.
So that's what I'm saying. That's why I said sometimes when people are short on time, it's an Erev Shabbos. It's not just Erev Yom Tov, Erev Shabbos, and they're going right from the cemetery, and it's like an hour before Shabbos. They have them sit at the cemetery and have what's Nehugi Avelos. They put down a bench and they take their shoes off. That is Mamish Nehugi Avelos. We're not so makbid today. We say you're going back in the car, you get home, you take your shoes off. But there, okay, Minhag Yerushalayim. Okay. When I say Minhag Yerushalayim, you've got nothing to argue on. Okay, back at the ranch. So this is now we're going to talk about Shmuel Rechok and Shmuel Rekrovo. So Machag v'Shiva Aveil Shiva. So Gemara has a question. 1 second. We have a Chag that's really 8 days, but Eimat Seres. We have a Chag that's 1 day. The Eimat Seres. The Chad Yoma. What about Shavuos is 1 day? Tosas actually says that when this is brought in the Yerushalmi, Tosas points out the Yerushalmi also brings this as well. The Yerushalmi says, what about the fact that there's a Chag called Shmini Atzeres, which is 8 days, right? Sukkot. And the answer is we have a rule for Shmini Atzeres called Shmini Atzeres is Regel Bifnei Atzma. So it's not an 8-day Yontiv, it's 7-day Yontiv and another single Yontiv, right? But this Atzeres is not Shmini Atzeres. This Atzeres refers to Shavuos.
The same logic would apply.
Correct.
Because it's Chag of 1 day before.
Correct. You could argue that, but it's not. But once again, it's a bigger chiddush to say it's a regular b'fnei atzma than to say it's a single day by itself. Okay. All right. Now, so the Gemara says, what about Shavuos, the Chag Yomahi? So, and if you say v'chavafakti chagechem la'avel, machag should be 1 day, so avel is 1 day. So the Gemara says, well, we used to have something else. There's a different kind of shiva. The tak is only 1 day. Hahumi ba'ile l'Reish Lakish, the Yom Reish Lakish, mishum Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, minay l'shmur rachoko she'en on the heges el yom echad. How do you know that this is what I told you about shmur rachoko is only 1 day or partial day? D'chsiv v'yafakti chagechem la'avel. So it says your holidays become an avelus. The Ashkechan Atzeres Dikvei Chag Dikvei Chad Yom Chag. We find that Shavuos is a 1 day holiday, and therefore this becomes the remez why Shmuel Rechoka is only 1 day. So you see the whole.
How can you use it for both? For both. Well, you're using the same pasuk for both.
So two different kinds of holidays of pasuk.
Oh, this is so.
So the answer is it's not a real limud. It's not a real limud. And second of all, the limud is saying that I'm going to turn your holidays into whatever holidays you have. There's a comparable avelus. So you have two kinds of holidays basically: 7 day holidays and 1 day holidays. It's actually very good. The 7 day holiday is a 7 day shiva. The 1 day holiday is a 1 day shmur rechoka shiva. Okay. So there. Okay. So it actually works. But once again, you have to really remazim. Okay, so this is the best. This introduces now Shmur Rechoka. Tan Rabbanan. Shmur Krova. Shmur Krova is the Avelus. You get the Shmur before 30 days. No Hege Shiva Ushloshim. You have a Shiva and you have a Shloshim. That's obvious. Shmur Rechoka ain't on the Hege El Yom Echad. Okay? 1 day for Shmur Rechoka. And the Gemara explains what it is. Eza Krova. What Shmur Krova? Ve'eza Rechoka. What Shmur Rechoka? Krova b'soch Shloshim Yom. Rechoka lachar Shloshim Yom. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva says there's a difference between Shmur Rechoka, Shmur Krova, 30 days or less than 30 days, and more than 30 days. Was it 7 days and Shloshim or just 1 day? Rabbi Akiva, Chachamim Omrim, dun dun dun. Here's what we don't follow. Acha Shmur Krova v'acha Shmur Rechoka nohege Shiva u'Shloshim. So comes along Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim and says like
we just learned that Rechoka was 1 day.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rabbi Akiva. Thank you. There was the first one was Rabbi Akiva. Thank you. Rabbi Akiva, comma. I put thank you very much, Mr. Bender. Didn't we
just learn that Rechoka is the Chachamim saying Rechoka is also 7 days?
Correct.
We just learned this 1 day.
So that's obvious. So now we're bringing this brisa, which tells us a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. We got into this in a back door. The back door was, how do you know that Shiva is 7 days? Then we said, what about the fact that there's Atzeres, Shavuos is 1 day? Oh, there's also something called Shmur Rechoka. And therefore, is going to be for 1 day there, for Shmur Rechoka. Once we have that, we now say, let's talk about Shmur Rechoka. And now it tells us there's actually two shitos. Rabbi Akiva, who we follow, and the Chachamim, who we don't follow. And you're all going to say, whoa, Chachamim versus Rabbi Akiva, Yochid v'Rabim, dun dun dun, Rabbi Akiva, you should go down. Right. So the Gemara says, wait, that's exactly what the Gemara says. So Amar Rabba Bar Chana Am Rav Yochanan, Kol Makom Shata Motzi Yochid Mekel v'Chachamim Machmirim. Wherever you find the Yochid is Mekel and the Chachamim, the Rabbim are Machmir, Halach and Karabim. Chutz Mizu, except in this case. Okay? So this is
the other rule.
He's telling you, he's basically giving you a world rule, a global rule that has the exception. Okay, global rule that whenever you have Yochid and Rabbim, Yochid is Mekel Chacham Machmi, follow Chacham, except here. She'af Bish Rabbi Akiva Mekel v'Chachamim Machmirim, Halacha Rabbi Akiva. Why? And here's what the Gemara says it again. Yom Shmuel Halacha Kedivrei Mekel be'Evel. Okay. So this becomes clearly in terms of the halacha kedivrei hamekel be'avelis. Comes up again and again and again. Okay.
Very important principle, I assume.
Yes, it is. It's a guiding principle all through avelis, and that becomes just not the issue in halachically in the Gemara. Even follows later on post Gemara. until our school came along. Okay.
Until you got the info.
So I don't know. The art school book of novellas. I don't know if anyone has ever read it. We shouldn't have to read it, but if you ever go through it and read the foot.
But a lot of times, when it comes to
very, very machmir.
But sometimes when it comes to complicated, it doesn't answer. It gives.
That's
wishy-washy.
Correct. This is Makor Baruch, the guy wrote it with all the shitos. Okay,
yeah.
Good.
Yes, this, no. Yes, no. What do you do? I don't know. He picked one.
I don't know.
Pick one.
I don't know. I mean,
I'm just saying. I looked up something once. It goes yes and no, and I go thank you.
Well, there is.
The Lambert.
Rabbi Gerson once showed me the T.A. Gavriel. This is what he uses.
Yes.
And Rav Zinner there, he says he has a whole section. This is the minhagim of Jews from Poland, and this is the minhagim of Jews from Romania, and this is the minhagim of Jews from Hungary.
Okay.
And they're all different.
Yep. Okay. Anyways, Nitei Gavriel. It's on HebrewBooks.org. All the volumes, or most of the volumes at least. Okay. Yeah. All right, where are we up to? So this is about Shmuel Rechok Shmuel Krova. Rabbi Chanina Asyale Shmua Diavuha Mi Bechozai. Okay, so Rabbi Chanina got a Shmua, and it obviously means a Shmua Rechoka, that his father passed away from Beis Chozai. In other words, it's giving you the places to tell you it took a while till the news got there. I don't know where Beis Chozai is, and I don't know where Rabbi Chanina was located. But he wanted to know, it obviously was after the time of Shmuel Rechoka. So Asla Kamed Rav Chisda came to Rav Chisda, he said to Amalei said to him, Shmuel Rechoka, Eino Heges Eliyom Echad. So he got the psak, Rav Chisda, it's one day. Okay? This is a real case. Rav Nosson Bar Ami, Asla Shmuel De'ime Mi Bechozai, similar kinds of things. Asla Kamed Rava, similar kinds of case. Right? Asla Kamed the Rabbi came to Rava. Amalei Hare Amru Shmuel Rechoka Eino Heges Eliyom Echad Bilvad. Okay? So this looks like that's
everybody agrees.
So far it looks like it's agreeing. Okay. So the Gemara has a question. Gemara never takes these things lying down. Esvei. Bamed Dvar Mamurim. When does it look like we say that Shmuel Rechoka is going to be knocked down to a single day? B'chamisha Meisei Mitzvah. This is for the 5 immediate Krovim, with the exception of Aval al Avivim. I'll tell you what they are in a moment. Shiva Shloshim. But when it comes to a Shmuel Rechoka for a parent, right, that still has Shiva and Shloshim. The 5 immediate relatives are son, daughter, brother, and sister, and wife. Right, the 2 remaining are father and mother. Okay, the difference between the first 5 and the last 2.
Parents.
Yeah, okay. The difference in terms of the process of mourning.
A year for
Correct. Right. So the parent has a year. That's so that svara of this brisa, which we'll see in a moment, we don't follow, says okay, you can knock off Shiva and Shloshim and say you reduce it to 1,
Right.
but the period of a year, right? The period of a year. Period of years is still going to go. Right. Therefore, if the period of the year still goes, so then you see that there's still sadness for a longer period of time. So even if the Shmuel Rechoka is after 30 days, you still have to go back to you start counting at that point.
Shiva and
the Shiva and Shloshim, yeah. Okay.
So you count a year from this time you hear.
Yeah. Or I guess it's what according to that svara. Right. Right. Correct. So anyways, the Gemara asks a question. So Amalei, so who's answering? So I guess Rav is answering here. Yichidahi v'lo svirlan kavase. Okay, this is a shitas yichida. We don't follow, and Rabbi Akiva, I guess, who is the opinion that we follow, does not make a difference, and Rabbi Akiva is not considered a shitas yichida. That's the fascinating thing about this. We're saying now this brisa is a shitas of a yachid that we don't follow, right? But with the Rabbi Akiva is not considered the shitas yichida for some reason. Okay, maybe because you see the other people follow that as well. V'losvirlan kavase. And how do I know this? The Tanya, we have a brisa. Maisa umeis avish Rabbi Tzadok beginzik. So a case of where the father of Rabbi Tzadok died, I guess in Ginzik, and Rabbi Tzadok was not in Ginzik, or maybe it's the other way around. He died in a different place. Okay, and after 3 years he found out about it, and he came V'shoal as Elisha ben Avuya Uzakanim. This is it looks like it could be the Elisha ben Avuya before he became Acher. Okay, wow.
Yes.
And what happened? And he said, "V'amru nahog shiva ushloshim." And he said, here's, let me read this and explain. And he said, Elisha ben Avuya and the Chachamim said that you have to sit to 7 and shloshim, shiva and shloshim. So you see that there is taka shita that we don't paskin like, which says you do sit shiva and shloshim for his father. That's what we're trying to say.
Clearly.
Okay, for Shmuel Rechoka. And even though, and we don't follow this, so there is actually such a shita. And when the Brisa talks about differentiating between father and mother versus the other 5, we're saying now Elisha ben Avuya is that very sheet itself.
It wasn't only him, it was
right. So it's not.
So this is the machlok between Rabbi Akiva, and the Chachamim.
No,
these guys were contemporaries of Rabbi Akiva.
Either that, or we don't, or saying that there's a difference between parents and non-parents.
Okay. But it could easily have been the other side.
Correct. So and another case, okay, and there's a case about a child now, a son. The son of Rav Achia died in the Gola, means he was in Eretz Yisrael, and the child died, or his son, I want to say child, the son died in somewhere outside of Chutz La'aretz, so which was they got the news once again after Shloshim, Yashav Alav Shiva Shloshim. Okay. So there is a shita of.
So here it's the son.
Here it's the son.
Correct. Yeah. So you see that this is following the shita
of the
Chachamim, correct? The Chachamim, but we're not going to follow that. We're not going to pascha like that. Okay. So notice that you're right. There are shitos. There are shitos that differentiate between parents and others, and then this one looks like it's a shita that says you're always going to sit for Shiva and Shloshim.
Right.
Okay. So now we have a very unusual story, and there's a couple of gersos how to read the story. Maybe you heard this. Maybe you heard about the story because it's one of these famous stories. Rav bar Achva the Rabbi Chia, Hu bar Achte the Rabbi Chia. Okay, if I remember correctly, there was 2 marriages here, and so Rav was the son of the brother of Rabbi Chia, a half brother of Rabbi Chia, and a half sister of Rabbi Chia. There were 2 second marriages, and they each came in with a child. So the brother and the sister we're talking about are not related. Okay, and these 2 became therefore Rav was the brother of that union between Rabbi of the stepchildren of Rabbi Chia and his wife. The stepchildren of the parents of Rabbi Chia. Okay, so but I'm saying that's why you have this funny kind of thing. He is the son of the brother of Rabbi Chia, and he's also the son of the sister of Rabbi Chia. Neither of whom were related to each other, but were brought into second marriages, okay, and are permissible to marry because there's no genetic connection. So therefore, you have this person Rav, not the Rav, a different Rav, who is known as Rav bar Achva the Rabbi Chia, and which also bar Achva the Rabbi Chia. So Kisalik Lahasam, when Rav came from, or maybe it is the Rav, came from his city in Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, where Rabbi Chia was. So Rabbi Chia is in Eretz Yisrael, yeah, it is the real Rav. Rav comes from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, and he's coming to Rav Chia. And there's a familiar connection between Rav and Rabbi Chia in a very roundabout way. Right? Rav is the son of the step siblings of Rabbi Chia. Okay, but that kind of makes him not related to Rabbi Chia, but he still wants to know about the parents of Rabbi Chia, if they're alive or deceased.
Who's the actual person who's coming?
Sounds like Yevamos, huh?
It sounds like some of the relationships.
Who's the person who actually came?
Rav comes from Bavel, Teretz Yisrael. The Rav,
okay.
Right, comes to Rabbi Chia.
Right.
Okay, Kisalik Lahasam. When he goes there, remember this is Talmud Bavli.
Yeah.
So Bavli is here, Bavel is here. There is Teretz Yisrael. He's going from Eretz Bavel to Teretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Chia is in Teretz Yisrael, and Rav is coming to Teretz Yisrael. So Amalei, so he says to Rabbi Chia, Abba Kayam. He says, is your father alive? Correct, is your father alive? And he responds, he says, Ima Kayamis.
I have a question.
Right, it's a question how he says it. Once again, he says, is your father alive? He says, is my mother alive? Okay, and
maybe say it back to him. Is your mother alive?
Right, is your mother alive? The question is, whose mother is he referring to? But he doesn't want to answer that.
Yeah.
So he says, in other words, you should ask about your mother, who is my sister, my stepsister. Right? It's a very complicated case. So then he says to him, okay, is my mother alive? So he says to him, Abba Kayim, is your father alive? Okay, so in other words, he doesn't really want to answer the question. He doesn't want to share the bad news that obviously it looks like the father has passed away. And that's our girsa. And there are other girsos which are probably just as confusing, whether Rabbi Chia is asking about the father of Rav, and Rav is answering, I guess, with a response, is what we have, and or the other gersa is actually Abba and Abba. He says, Abba Kai, is my father alive? And he responds back, is your father alive? And he says, is my mother alive? He says, is your mother alive? However it is, he's not answering the question. Whether he's going from father to mother, mother to father, or whether he's responding as a question to the actual question, is my father alive? Is your father alive? Right? Is your father alive? Is your father alive? It's not that important as the fact that he's deferring what the question is. Which, by the way, you see, it's not so easy to give bad news. You give it roundabout until you figure it out. So right away, Rav understands to be that his father has passed away, right? Probably maybe the mother's passed away as well. So he now has with him his shamas, and you see from the events that now he does to his shamas clearly what happens with a shmul rechoka. So Amalei l'shamei. So Rav says to his shamas, his assistant, says, Chalos li min alai, take off my shoes. Right, Rav is a big rabbi, doesn't pay to bend over, he's not mechubad, he has an assistant take his shoes off, number one. Second of all, holech acharai klila beis hamerchatz, take my clothing, my outer clothing, and follow me to the bathhouse, and this is what you're going to do. So he says, this is the people watching this story, record what he says, and they say, Shema Mino, we learn from this class, we learn three things that are important here about a novel. What do we learn? Shema Mino Ovel also b'nila sasando. First we learn the novel can't wear shoes. Right? Exactly what they do in Eretz Yisrael, they take him off at the cemetery. Exactly the moment he hears it, he took his shoes off. Right? It's interesting, he doesn't do kriya. Right? He just has to take his shoes off. The first thing. And second thing is, Ushma Mino Shmo Rechoka Eino Nohegas El Yom Echad. And we see from the fact that what was he going to do after he took his shoes off? What was the next thing he was doing? Going to take the bathhouse, which in the Avel can't do rechitza. Right? You can wash if you're dirty, but you can't really go to bath. You can't take a shower. Ask anyone. The Avel, the first thing they do when they finish the shiva, they take a shower. Okay? You feel physically disheveled. So maybe not. Okay.
Do what you feel.
Right.
Do what you feel.
No, he said maybe the story here is Erev Shabbos. But it wasn't. Okay. So then you see, first of all, Avel can't wear shoes. Second of all, you see that Shmuel Rechoka is only Yom Echad.
Right.
Ushmamino, and the third part is the correlate of the second part. Mixes Yom Kikulo. Okay. So you don't have to do a full day, but a partial day as well.
All he did was take off his shoes.
Correct. He took off his shoes. He did one Nehugi Avelis. He waited there a minute. And they said, we're going to the bathhouse. So, so this was sitting Shiva for Rav's Rav's brother and Rav Chia's brother and sister, which makes it Rav's parents. I'm not quite sure who is sitting Shiva for who.
There's a whole diagram here, but I don't understand.
Right,
it.
correct.
I'll leave it to you.
So, but you see from this, once again, the Gemara is trying to show that we're paskening
Clearly
that Shmuel Rechoka is one day and it's a partial day.
Clearly.
Okay. So now there's a couple of corollaries. Rav Achia, I'm sorry. So the Gemara brings this because, right. The Gemara brings this piece not only to show what the halach is, but in the previous situation, the previous line of the Gemara, we had a case about the son of Rav Achia who died in the Golah, who sat for Shiva and Shloshim. And somehow the Gemara tries to confuse, or thinks for a moment to confuse, Rav Achia and Rabbi Chia. So the Gemara's response is that's not the same guy. And that's why the Gemara brings it as a question. Rav Achia lechud, Rabbi Chia lechud, Rav Achia lechud. They're different people. So Rav Achia believed in Shiva and Shloshim after Shmuel Rechoka. Rav Chia does not believe in Shiva and Shloshim after Shmuel Rechoka. Okay. Rav Yossi bar Avin Shama Shmuel Krova Beregel Ulamotze Regel Nasa Rechoka. Okay, this is a good question. So when you hear you get the Shmua, it's still within 30 days. It's Yantif. It's during Yantif. There's no sitting Shiva on Yantif. Right. So even though you got the news, it doesn't take effect. If it were to take effect, it wouldn't take effect until afterwards. So if an Avel who would get the news, who a funeral takes place on Yantif, when does the Shiva start? After Yantif.
Yeah.
Right? So the question is, if the Shmuel comes on Yantif, and it's when he hears about it, it's within 30 days. But by the time Yantif is over, 30 days are gone. Is that a Shmuel Krova or Shmuel Rechoka? What is it? Do you go by when you hear it, or do you go by when it really takes effect? You heard it. You can't say you didn't want to hear it. You heard it. But it doesn't really mean anything until after Yantif. So that's the Gemara's question. Excuse me. Do we say that the days of Yantif are considered, or is that a statement? Okay, it's a statement. Okay. It sounds like a statement. And Tani Rabbi Ada Demin Kaisare Kamed Rabbi Yochanan Shama Shmuel Krova B'Shabbos Ulamotzi Shabbos Nasa Rechoka. Not only Yantif, but even Shabbos.
It's really one day now.
Correct. And Shabbos could be a little different because Shabbos
normally doesn't.
Shabbos does have Shiva taking place. Right? We said, for example, that Dvarim Shabbatzina, private things, right, are still prohibited on Shabbos. For example, intimacy between a husband and wife are prohibited on Shabbos. The only thing that really falls in that category during Avelis. Yantif, it knocks it off completely. So you can argue Yantif, there's nothing altogether. But what about Shabbos? So the argument is, once again, the question: before Shabbos, or on Shabbos it was before, and after Shabbos it's after. Nasa Rechoka. The Eina Motzei Shabbos Nasa Rechoka. Eina Noheg Ela Yom Echad. Okay, so you don't have to. You only keep one day. It's considered Shmuel Rechoka. Another Gemara is another question. Korea, Eino Korea. Does an Avel who gets a Shmuel Rechoka, does he have to do Kriya or not? Okay, it's a good question.
It's a good question, but I don't know. If he's going to do Avelis even for one day, I would think he would.
Right, you would think he would. So it's Machlokes. Rabbi Mani Amar Eino Korea, Rabbi Chanina Amar Korea. Okay, so it's a Machlokes. We pass on, by the way, Eino Korea. It's Machlokas Rabbi Mani and Rabbi Chanina, and they talk to each other. Amalei Rabbi Mani and Rabbi Chanina. Bishlam aladidi, according to me, who says that you don't do kriya. The Amina in a kriya. Haina delo ika avelas shiva. So I understand why there's no avelas shiva. You're not doing anything. But Ella Didach, but according to you, Rabbi Chanina says that the Shmur Rechoka rips Kriya. So the Amar Korea, Kriya below Shiva Mi'ika. Can you ever do Kriya without sitting Shiva? It goes hand in hand. So you're telling me you're going to do Kriya and then sit for 1 hour. Does that make sense? Do you ever find this separated? So Gemara says, well, yes, you do. V'atanya isi avua de Rabbi Zera, v'amale achva de Rabbi Zera, kamei de Rabbi Zera, misha ein lo chalak lekroa, v'nizdamin lo besoch shiva. If a person didn't really have a garment, I don't know what that means. I don't know what he's wearing. Okay, so he had undergarments. Okay, these cases don't have to be real necessarily, right? But the person's living in a barrel, and he only gets the clothing in the middle of Shiva, and he gets it in the middle of Shiva. Korea, he rips Kriya. Lachar Shiva ain't a Korea. But after Shiva, you don't do Kriya. So even though you say, what's the time to do Kriya? So you see, you don't do Kriya without Shiva. Okay. And who said?
Even if you've got an abbreviated period, you still do Kriya.
So even if you did an abbreviated period, you still do kriya. Right. But that's because it gets cut off. It's not that you don't do shiva for a certain period of time. You're doing shiva, but it's terminated. It's really shiva, but just the shiva stops abruptly. Okay. So that's what he says. That's the svara. To who? To Rabbi. Who says this? Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Mani says to Rabbi Chanina. Okay. Mishen lo chalakach v'nizam l'soch shiva korea lachar shiva eno korea. Okay.
Well, that was nizdamen b'toch shiva. That was achu. The Rabbi.
Correct, but that's the Gemara. The Gemara is proving. Right. So Gemara says, you see there's a case where you don't do...
He's saying you don't do Kriya if it's after the Shiva, right?
Right, the proof is that's being brought that... Let's read again.
We're further down, right?
Right, below. Correct. So the statement. So it's a little complicated, okay? And then read it correct. I'll just back up a step. Rabbi Chanina is arguing as follows. According to me, that you don't do kriya, I understand why there's no shiva. But according to you, Rabbi Mani, who suggests that you do kriya and then you don't do shiva, is there ever a case where you don't do kriya, you do kriya and there's no shiva? And is there ever a case? And the Gemara responds, yeah, there is a case. Right? Where's the case as follows? The case, and I stopped it too quickly. The case is the guy doesn't have anything to wear, and he gets a garment at the end of Shiva. Right. He doesn't do Kriya. However, on this, Ani Rabbi Zera responded to the statement, Basrei, Bamed Var Mamurim B'chamisha Meisei Mitzvah, Aval Al Aviv Alimo Koreh V'holech. But with a father and a mother, you would do Kriya after Shiva is over. So if you had the situation where you had Shiva, you didn't have a garment to do Kriya in, and then you got the garment after Shiva, for a parent, you would do Kriya. So you see that there is a case where you do Kriya without Shiva, and the Gemara's response is, Ki Tanyahi L'chvod Avi V'imo. The Gemara's response is that case, and there's a couple steps here, that case where you're doing Kriya after Shiva is over, for a parent, that's not really because of Shiva. That's simply a way of showing Kibbut Avayim. Kibbut Avayim always works. But really, in terms of Shiva, you never have a case where you do Kriya and then there's no Shiva. What's happening here? So Rabbi Chanina says, I'm vindicated to say that you don't do Kriya, because the moment that you did Kriya, you'd have to sit Shiva.